Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. Today we're talking about the hypodermic needle theory, which was one of the earliest ways of thinking about how the mass media influences audiences. It was developed in the 1920s and 1930s after researchers observed the effect of propaganda during World War I and events like the Orson Welles War of the Worlds broadcast. The hypodermic needle theory is a linear communication theory which suggests that media messages are injected directly into the brains of a passive audience. It suggests that we're all the same, and we all respond to media messages in the same way. This way of thinking about communication media influence is no longer really accepted. In the 1930s, many researchers realized the limitations of this idea, and some dispute whether early media theorists gave the idea any serious attention at all. Nevertheless, the hypodermic needle theory continues to influence the way we talk about the media. People believe that the mass media has a powerful effect. Parents worry about the influence of television and violent video games. News outlets run headlines like, "Is Google making us stupid?" and "Grand Theft Auto led teen to kill." So how did this way of thinking about the mass media develop? Back in 1927, Harold Lasswell, an American political scientist and communication theorist, published a book called Propaganda Technique in the World War. Writing about the effect of Allied propaganda during World War I, Lasswell wrote, "From a propaganda point of view, it was a matchless performance, for Wilson brewed the subtle poison which industrious men injected into the veins of a staggering people until the smashing powers of the Allied armies knocked them into submission." The Pain Fund studies, which were conducted between 1929 and 1932 and looked at the effect movies have on children, also contributed to this idea that the mass media has a powerful and direct influence on audiences. Although these studies have been criticised for their lack of scientific rigour, they were really one of the first and most comprehensive examinations of how the media works. Writing about the influence of movies, the project chairman W. W. Charters wrote that they have the potential to profoundly affect the way that children behave. Even in the 1930s, however, researchers were starting to realise that this way of thinking about media influence was kind of inadequate. Then, in 1938, Orson Welles and the Mercury Theatre broadcast a dramatisation of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds.
Ladies and gentlemen, I have a grave announcement to make. Incredible as it may seem, both the observations of science and the evidence of our eyes lead to the inescapable assumption that those strange beings who landed in the Jersey farmlands tonight are the vanguard of an invading army from the planet Mars. The battle which took place tonight at Grover Mills has ended in one of the most startling defeats ever suffered by an army in modern times. 7,000 men armed with rifles and machine guns pitted against a single fighting machine of the invaders from Mars. 120 known survivors. The rest strewn over the battle area from Grover's Mill to Plainsboro, crushed and trampled to death under the metal feet of the monster, or burned to cinders by its heat ray.
The program, which was presented in the format of a news bulletin, caused some listeners to believe that the Earth was being invaded by Martians. The New York Times claimed that thousands of people were gripped by mass hysteria. While thousands of people may have been panic-stricken, they were only a small proportion of the 6 million people who enjoyed a quiet night around the radio. On the surface, events like these seem to suggest that the media can have a powerful influence on audiences. Nevertheless, the hypodermic needle theory is kind of inadequate to describe the process of communication and media influence. It just doesn't work. Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. What do Kony 2012 and former US presidential candidate Al Gore have in common? Well, they're both great examples of communication theory called the two-step flow theory. In the early days of mass communication, people believed that the media had a direct and powerful influence on audiences. This way of thinking about media influence became known as the hypodermic needle theory. Of course, communication is a complex process, and this theory soon proved inadequate. In the 1940s, American sociologist Paul S. Lazarsfeld wrote The People's Choice, a book that summarized his research into the November 1940 presidential election. In the course of his research, he discovered that we're more likely to be influenced by other people than the mass media. Lazarsfeld called these people opinion leaders. Along with Elihu Katz, he later published a book called Personal Influence, in which he provided further evidence for this theory. The two-step flow theory suggests that opinion leaders pay close attention to the mass media and pass on their interpretation of media messages to others. Unlike the hypodermic needle theory, the two-step flow theory maintains that audiences are active participants in the communication process. And it's still a theory that has a little credibility today. In a paper presented at the 20th Annual World Wide Web Conference in 2011, researchers looking at the flow of information on the social networking site Twitter revealed that they'd found significant evidence to support the two-step flow theory. After analysing the flow of information, the researchers discovered that news finds its way to people through a number of prominent and influential opinion leaders. They found considerable support for the two-step flow of information. Almost half the information that originates from the media passes to the masses indirectly via a diffuse intermediate layer of opinion leaders who, although classified as ordinary users, are more connected and more exposed to the media than their followers. The two-step flow theory is also of interest to the advertising industry. A long time ago, advertisers realised that word of mouth and recommendations are a powerful way to sell products. Books like The Anatomy of Buzz are all about how important word of mouth is to advertising campaigns. A lot of campaigns set out to use personal influence by targeting opinion leaders. Anecdotally, this is something we can all probably relate to. We're more likely to buy a product if it's been recommended to us by a friend or someone that we trust. So, what do Al Gore and Coney 2012 have in common? They're both great examples of opinion leaders in action. It's important to remember that Lazarsfeld defined opinion leaders as being respected individuals in the community. They weren't part of the media. They were the type of people that we interact with every day. In the age of social networking, however, prominent celebrities and journalists often sidestep the media altogether and talk with us directly. In some ways, these people, while they might be part of the mass media, meet many of the criteria of opinion leaders. Al Gore is a great example of an opinion leader. In 2008, he was the focus of a documentary called An Inconvenient Truth, which followed his campaign to raise awareness about global warming. He's a great example of someone who pays close attention to an issue and helps to sway public opinion. As part of something called the Climate Project, Al Gore enlisted the help of 1,000 public speakers, what Lazarsfeld might have called opinion leaders, to help spread his message about global warming. The campaign reached an estimated audience of over 1 million people. Coney 2012 is an online video created by a group of activists aiming to have a Ugandan war criminal, Joseph Kony, brought to justice. Virtually overnight, the video and the campaign became a viral success. To generate exposure for the campaign, the activists enlisted the help of several celebrities, including actor George Clooney. The success of the campaign can be attributed to a number of factors, such as its slick production value and its use of social media. But the importance that these opinion leaders played in spreading the message through social networking sites can't be overlooked. The two-step flow theory of communication is superior to the hypodermic needle theory in a number of ways. First, it acknowledges that audiences are composed of individuals who are part of a society. They actively interpret media messages and are influenced by people around them. Of course, this theory has some limitations as well. When we're thinking about modern communication, it's very likely that there's more than two steps in the flow of communication. Nevertheless, the two-step flow theory is still an interesting way to think about communication and media influence.
Well, I'm glad you bring up those terms because those, just like social networks and social networking, those terms you will see in all kinds of popular press. And they mean different things to different people and in different contexts. So I always advise folks when you're reading about influencers or opinion leaders to ask yourself, what does that mean in this context? How was this person defined as an opinion leader in this context? So I'm going to tell you from our perspective what we mean by that. Opinion leaders are individuals that are turned to by a certain number, a more significant number of individuals in a community. So it's kind of a broad definition, but it could be about anything. So if you think about your own personal networks, if you are making a decision about where to buy a house, there's a certain group of people that you would turn to about that. And in that group, there are probably one or two individuals you could think about that, a lot of folks go to this person because they know a lot about it. Maybe they're in the mortgage industry, or maybe they are a realtor, or, there's someone that a lot of people know. And if you're in a business setting and you've got to make a decision about purchasing an enterprise-wide software application, there are people that you would turn to for advice, for experience, seeking their wisdom and guidance. And some of those people will also be turned to by a variety of others. So in our definition, opinion leaders are individuals who they may not be, movie stars or be in the popular press or really known very widely, but in their circle of friends and colleagues, in their communities, they are considered to be knowledgeable, and their opinion is sought more often than others.
Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. Today we're looking at the agenda setting function theory, which suggests that the media can't tell you what to think, but it can tell you what to think about. The agenda setting function theory was developed by Maxwell McCombs and Donald Shaw in 1972 as a result of their study of North Carolina voters during the 1968 presidential election campaign. This study found a correlation between issues that voters believed were important and issues that the media gave prominence to. McCombs and Shaw argued that the media use a number of cues to indicate the importance of an issue. On the front page of a newspaper, for example, the importance of a story is indicated by the size of its heading. Likewise, a story that appears on the front page is more important than a story that appears on page 5. According to this theory, the media has the power to focus public discussion on particular issues. Again, it can't tell us what to think, but it can tell us what to think about. In 1998, McCombs increased the scope of this theory to include a phenomenon called framing. He argued that in addition to telling us what to think about, the media can also tell us how to think about a story. News reports might focus on one particular aspect of an issue or report about something in a particular way. In Australia, we see this happening with news reports about asylum seekers. The Daily Telegraph and the Herald Sun, which are both owned by News Corporation, seem to frame the issue in a particular way, with headlines like 35 asylum sneakers costing us a packet and boat people in our suburbs. Here, the refugee story is framed as a social and economic burden on the Australian people. These stories could be framed to focus on humanitarian issues or whether Australia is meeting its international obligations. A number of studies have been done that make the agenda-setting function theory seem pretty plausible. Typically, they show a correlation between the number of news stories on an issue and how important people think the issue is. Although the agenda-setting function theory has been around since the 1970s, it's still a great way to think about communication and media influence. Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. In this episode, we're talking about Joseph Clapper's reinforcement theory. In the early days of communication, people thought that the media had a powerful and direct influence on audiences. In the 1960s, communication theorist Joseph Clapper released a landmark book called The Effect of Mass Communication, in which he argued that the media has little power to influence people, and, most of the time, it just reinforces our pre-existing attitudes and beliefs. He thought it was important to move away from the notion that the media has a direct and powerful influence on audiences, focusing instead on how the media works amid other influences in a total situation. Clapper argued that people's attitudes, beliefs, and behaviour was more likely to be influenced by their schools, family, community, and religious institutions. According to Clapper, the only time the media can influence people is when the media introduces a new idea or concept. He pointed out that there are particular attitudes and beliefs that the mass media is particularly unlikely to change, such as racial or religious views. In The Effect of Mass Communication, Clapper cites hundreds of studies that support his theory, including a 1948 study which revealed that voters were predisposed to opinions and beliefs held by their families, including one young man who said he was going to vote Democratic because his grandfather would skin him if he didn't. Anecdotally, I can kind of relate to this. I can't think of any instances where the media has changed my opinion on an issue, but I can think of quite a few where my friends, family and colleagues have. A 1970s study that examined the sitcom All in the Family found that people who were like the character Archie Bunker, who was parodied for his racist blue-collar attitude, didn't see the satirical nature of the program and perceived the character as an ordinary guy. As Clapper argued, the media is more likely to reinforce than change. According to Professor Robert Wicks, the effects of mass communication had a pretty profound effect on research into media and communications, creating a framework that allowed researchers from different disciplines to build an understanding of how we interact with media texts. The advantage of the reinforcement theory is that it turns our attention away from the simplistic idea that the media has a direct and powerful effect on audiences, and encourages us to think about the whole picture. Next time you find yourself nodding in agreement when you watch a news or current affairs program, it's probably the reinforcement theory in action. Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. Ever been told that television's going to rot your brain? Or that violent video games will turn you into a homicidal maniac? These are just a few of the accusations that have been levelled at the media in a frenzy generated by a moral panic. So what is a moral panic? It's basically any widespread anxiety about an issue that's said to threaten the very fabric of society. Moral panics often occur around forms of media technology. It seems that people are deeply suspicious of new media. Writer Douglas Adams put it best when he said that anything invented after you're 35 is against the natural order of things. This sort of anxiety is nothing new. In fact, around 400 BC, classical Greek philosopher Socrates was concerned that the advent of writing would create forgetfulness, and people would generally know nothing. In the 1860s, British politicians blamed popular culture for delinquent behaviour. One argued that cheap publications and theatre performances of an immoral character would lead children to a life of dishonesty and vice. Fast forward to the 1950s, when American psychiatrist Dr. Frederick Wertham published a book called The Seduction of the Innocent, which claimed that comic books were a danger to children. Among other things, he claimed that Batman and Robin were gay lovers who lived in a homosexual paradise. Without a shred of evidence, he claimed that reading the light-hearted adventures of Batman and the Boy Wonder would encourage children to entertain homosexual fantasies. During this period, comic books were under attack for corrupting children. Outrage surrounding the horrific content of comic books led to the introduction of a comic book code that prohibited violence and gore in an attempt to curb juvenile delinquency. In the 1980s, Britain worked itself into a frenzy over violent horror movies. According to newspapers at the time, these so-called video nasties were corrupting children. Newspapers and magazines went crazy with headlines like, "The Vile Side of Video," "Taken Over by Something Evil from the TV Set." This article was apparently about a child who was possessed by one of these video cassettes. Public concern led Parliament to introduce the Video Recording Act of 1984. Many of these films were banned outright or censored for a British audience. In the United States, Dungeons and Dragons came under fire when it was linked to a number of suicides and murders in the 1980s. A report on 60 Minutes explored how vulnerable kids could be influenced by the board game. Dungeons and Dragons founder Gary Gygax dismissed these claims as unscientific and a witch hunt. Although these murders and suicides were tragic, at the time there were around 4 million children in the United States playing the game. On Tuesday, April 20, 1999, Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold killed 12 students and a teacher at Columbine High School in Denver, Colorado. In the aftermath of the tragedy, commentators were quick to blame the mass media, including television programs like South Park, violent video games, and the lyrics of Marilyn Manson. In Bowling for Columbine, documentary filmmaker Michael Moore explores possible reasons for this tragedy, pointing out the social and cultural problems that underpin events like these. The backlash against popular culture in the aftermath of Columbine was another moral panic. As Henry Jenkins points out in his article Lessons from Littleton, most kids are not at risk from the media they consume. The next time you read about the dangers of social networking or how video games are making us violent, ask yourself whether it's a legitimate story about the effect of new media, or it's just another moral panic. Welcome to Media in Minutes, where I talk you through important concepts in media and communication. Representation refers to the idea that everything we see or hear in the media has been constructed. Representations themselves can take many forms, such as radio segments, newspaper articles, photographs, films, and television programs. Just about everything you see in the media is a representation of something. Every day we're inundated with representations of people, events, and ideas. While some media representations, like television, news, and documentary film, may seem realistic, we have to remember that they're just constructions. At best, the media can only represent reality. What we see on our television screens or on the front page of our daily newspapers is someone else's interpretation of reality. And this can be said of everything we see in the media. When you see a politician or a celebrity in the newspaper, you're seeing a constructed image of that person, a representation. It's not a real person, it's a constructed image of that person. Representations are created through a process of selection, omission, and construction. Consider a photograph, probably the most basic type of media representation. It's often said that the camera never lies, but like all media representations, photographs are constructed. Before you even take a photo, you've selected what's going to be in it, made decisions about what you're going to leave out, and you've also decided how the subject of your photograph will be represented, making decisions about how they'll be lit and what type of camera angle you're going to use. These decisions all influence the meaning that you create and how audiences will read your representation. The word code refers to any system of signs that are used to communicate meaning. We're surrounded by these codes: traffic lights, written language, mathematics, clothing, body language. These codes are made up of signs that have culturally agreed meanings. The meaning of a sign can be denotative or connotative. The denotative meaning of a sign is its literal meaning, the concept that it refers to, whereas the connotation of a sign refers to the cultural or personal associations it might have for the person reading it. Colour is a great example of a code. Different colours have culturally agreed meanings and connotations. In Western society, the colour black is associated with mourning and depression, the colour green with environmentalism, pink with femininity. When you're dressing yourself, you probably think carefully about the colour of your clothing and the meaning that it conveys. This is also true when you're making media products. Anyone who's ever made a film knows that codes like shot size, camera angle, camera movement, and mise-en-scène all contribute to the message you're sending. When you're thinking about media, it's often interesting to consider how events, ideas, and people have been represented. Deconstructing media texts in this way is also useful because you really start to understand how meaning is created in media texts and, hopefully, become more successful at making them yourself.
เขาจะได้อะไร ถ้าเขาทำแบบนี้ทุกวันเขาจะไม่ได้อะไรเลย ไม่ได้รวยขึ้นไม่ได้ออกทีวีไม่มีใครรู้จักไม่ได้มีชื่อเสียงที่มากขึ้นเพราะสิ่งที่เขาได้คือได้แค่ความรู้สึกได้เห็นความสุขได้เข้าใจได้ความรักได้ในสิ่งที่เงินซื้อไม่ได้ได้โลกที่สวยงามกว่าเดิมในชีวิตคุณอะไรคือสิ่งที่คุณต้องการมากที่สุด
ไทยประกันชีวิตเชื่อในความดี
We train dogs to guide people with a trauma out of a nightmare, because we not only help people who cannot see, but also those who have seen too much.
This is an urgent appeal from the RSPCA to help rescue animals in danger. Abuse, shocking cruelty, relentless neglect. We're here for suffering animals 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We never rest. We often find animals barely surviving in atrocious conditions. How could anyone treat an animal so horrifically? No animal should have to suffer like this. Puppies and kittens starving to death in filthy cages. Please call 08000 121 795 or text CARE4 to 81400 or visit our website and give just £3 a month. Because day and night, the RSPCA rescues animals from shocking conditions, from people who simply don't care. We exist only because of public donations, and for us to be there, we need your support. These innocent animals need your help right now. Please call 08000 121 795 or text CARE4 to 81400 or visit rspca.org.uk/247. Just £3 a month will ensure that any time an animal needs us, we're there for them. Day or night, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Thank you.
Ты спеши ко мне, если я вдали, если трудно мне, если я в самом страшном сне, если тень беды в моем огне, ты спеши, когда обидят вдруг, ты спеши, когда мне нужен друг, ты спеши, когда грущу в тиши, ты спеши, ты спеши. Не спеши, не спеши, когда мы с тобой вдвоем, и вдали беда, скажут да, листья и вода, звезды и огни, и поезда. Не спеши, когда глаза в глаза, не спеши, когда спешить нельзя, не спеши, когда весь мир в тиши, не спеши, нет, не спеши.
Where do you study? Lincoln.
Lincoln.
The University of their here.
I am trying to learn!